First of all, thank you very much for cooperating with us and in this very special Congress that we are trying to put in place in a very complicated situation, as you may understand, with the pandemics, because suddenly everybody start communicating with these digital tools, and so we are kind of a flood of information and events in this area. So as we don't have to spend time to make a trip from one place to another, everybody is much more available to connect to each other through these platforms, and so that becomes in a way more difficult to find all the schedules to make these events possible. Thank you very much to help us with INTA and to this Congress, and I have to thank very much all the speakers and the people that will participate in the debates. In name of INTA, we are very grateful that you agreed to come with us and to develop this this Congress. I think that we have, after almost 1.5 years of this pandemic situation, a few issues become very clear for everybody. We have a lot of consequences. Some of them maybe maybe in a new normal or a new future way of living in our cities. Another ones are means that we have to change the way we plan the cities and the way we look to urban planning and urbanism, and a few others are also consequences in terms of health, of course, but also in terms of economic and in terms of how we face globalization. I think that a few consequences make us be more conscious about the fragility, how fragile this world can be in such a situation. And if you look back at the first time that this pandemic starts, there was very different perspectives about its evolution, and I think that most of them have failed. In one way, people thought that could be face this situation in a shorter time. I remember that World Health Organization told us that by the end of 2020, everything was settled. It was not the case. And now we are postponing that to 2022. And a lot of things are changing in the way we look for our world, and also the consequences of the climate change issues could affect us, even in a situation of health like this pandemic. In another way, we also see that that globalization that take a delocalization of a lot of industries create an enormous problem with the logistics and enormous problems to produce the goods and namely all the medical support and apparatus that have been stopped in a certain way because they are always produced in Asia and China and things like that. And suddenly we looked that Europe and North America, namely, could not go in the same way that you move your strategic industries to around the world where it was labor forces were cheaper, but when we have these kind of lockdowns, you suffer the consequences. In another way, in a more local way, I think that we have seen what the importance of to have balanced neighborhoods where people can uh, have a kind of proximity to goods, to shopping, to some services, and to green areas, and that seems very, very important in a lot of towns, in the big ones, and the small ones. We can see that the places where these we don't have a kind of uh, very strict zoning and separation of functions around the urban area. Uh, People support more in a more easy way, if we can say so, the consequences of the lockdown and the consequences of the pandemic. And in another way, we have also an acceleration of certain ways of urban logistics, of work at distance, of shopping by internet, and the way we contact each other. And I think that some of these things will remain after the pandemics in a very uh, survey that have been done in with the big firms in Portugal, and that the results have been published last weekend. The big tertiary companies in banking or insurance or communications or consultancy, they are preparing for people to work only 2 days or maximum of 3 days at office, and the rest of it at home. And that will be introduced big changes in terms of the need of floor spaces, in terms of mobility, in terms of the organization of day-to-day life. So I think there are a lot of things to discuss about the city after this COVID, and how we can be more efficient, and especially how we can prepare our cities to face in a more human way and in a more efficient way this kind of episodes, these kind of situations. In another way, there are also a lot of solidarity issues in terms of that come more evident and becomes more clear and more shared in this pandemic. And I think that is a very positive way. We see a lot of people involved to help and to take care of the population, more fragile ones, the elderly, the children, etc. And and I think that this new rediscovery of the society and how important state, society, and our neighbors are is something that will remain, because after 2 years that it's supposed to, the duration of this pandemic, 2 years is a long time, and it's a long time to change some habits, and it's a long time to see consequences, and to see how can we deal in a different way in our lives. There are a few challenges, and we have put that in evidence in our announcement of the Congress, in terms of urbanism of proximity and the 15-minute cities and all the things that goes around that. The problems of less mobility, more accessibility, how to adapt public transport to these new kind of situations that we are facing very important problems, because during a lot of time we are aiming to have very good transport systems, but they can support more or less the cost of operation. And now we are clearly is clearly evident that we cannot stay in this situation. We have to uh, have much more public money in public transport because to respond to the sanitary restrictions, we cannot face the mass transportation as we faced before. So that is also a problem. The same to housing. Houses becomes not only a place to stay after work, but it can stay as a place to work, a place to learn, and that also introduce changes in the way we design our houses and how we can adapt that to that. And also problems of health structures and this idea of huge centralization of health services uh, uh, show us that it was not the good response for this kind of situations. So you have to be much more flexible and you have to have much more levels of health service and not this kind of huge concentration of service in a few places. And in another way, it shows also that urban governance uh, should be much more improved at the different levels. That separation, the very strict separation about what is the role of central governments or regional governments and the role of municipalities and the role of urban districts and the population itself show us that we have to be much more collaborative and much more integrated in all of this. So I think this is some of the issues that we would like discuss in this Congress. As you know, this Congress is organized in three times, in three periods. This is the first one in English. In a week, we have the same kind of approach with the French-speaking people, and by September we will. After producing some conclusions and the document for discussion, we will meet again for a final synthesis of this discussion. So once again, thank you very much for coming, and I hope that you find this time spent with us useful, and I'm quite sure that our speakers and the people that we have invited to discuss these issues will bring us new ideas and new reflections, new concepts, and also uh, uh, share with us experience that have been taking place during these uh, complex times that we are living since 1.5 years. So thank you very much, and I give you the floor, Michelle, to run now the presentations of our uh, invited keynote speakers.
Thank you very much, Fernando. We invite you to
just before that, and I think Marie de la Catteray show me that. I want to thank. I noticed that, but I was almost forgetting that. I want to thank very much Anthony Bourdelle and Michel Soudarkis for the immense work to put this Congress in place. I think that when we try to do that in this way, we is always we have all the problems that we have with the normal Congress, except the meals, but we have much more other problems to put all these things together. I think that these digital conferences show us that we can share ideas all around the world in a very easy way, but it don't replace the physical contact and the need that to sit around the table and to discuss the things. And I think that the work of Anthony and Michel, it was quite enormous to try to make it the more vibrant and the more participative as possible. So thank you very much for both.
Thank you, President. Let's jump immediately to a message from Canada. Sylvain Ducas is a former director of planning of the city of Montreal, is now a consultant, urban consultant, and he will, for this sessions, he will frame in 7 minutes, framing the issues in the spirit of what has been said, what Fernando has been said about the consequences of the epidemic on our urban system. Sylvain.
Thank you, Michel. Thank you, Fernando. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending if you're in the American continent or European continent. I would like to share my screen and start up with that. Let's see. There, I guess you see it, don't you?
Yes.
Good. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to start with that introduction given by INTA in presenting the Congress, where we say that health is a cross-cutting theme in urban development with implication for housing, mobility, and social inequalities. And environmental and health crisis and the possibility of future social crisis radically question the actions of citizens and all the actors in the city. And I would add, and all the national governments and international organizations also. So I found this statement quite inspiring and brought me to some thoughts that are not very optimistic to say the least, but I would like to share them with you in order to stir up our discussion on our future actions as planners. We have been developing during the last 35 years an international agenda on sustainable development with the latest one with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and including also national and local agendas with, let's face it, mediocre success, and if we accept some specific actions and particular results. We have been developing objectives and measures to adapt our cities to climate change impacts and have more or less improved the situation in some cases. But in general, we're not capable of meeting the goals of the reduction of GHG emissions, by instance. At best, we have stabilized our consumption of fossil energy, but most of our economies are still very dependent on that source of energy. And the use of the car is still the dominant transportation mode around the world, and the implementation of sustainable mobility in cities remains quite a challenge, as Fernando just stressed it out. A recent report from the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices stressed that climate change is not just an environmental and economic threat, it is also a threat to public health. Climate change will make existing health inequities worse and increase costs to health systems and economy unless governments work together to invest in preparation and prevention. So the risks are twofold. First, the impacts of climate change on health are increasing. The impact on quality of air, the heat waves. I just hear that in Moscow, you're suffering from that today. We have floods like it happened in Paris recently, forest fires like just happened in California, a drought also in the southwest of the United States, for instance. Also, health and social systems are often unable to meet the needs of those most vulnerable people to climate-related health hazards. So health and climate change policy objectives cannot be viewed in isolation. They are fundamentally interconnected, as the Canadian Institute of Climate Choices indicated, with a broader social and economic policy landscape. Among the basic needs that we're still facing as societies, even among developed countries, stands the challenge for the allowance of decent and affordable housing. Housing is still basically seen as a product of the free market and not as a need for everyone. In addition to the climate crisis, The housing crisis is another manifestation of the inequity in most of our countries that has been stressed during the pandemic. Remain issues of redistribution of wealth within our countries and between richer and poorer countries. A recent interview given by the UN General Secretary, Antonio Guterres, stressed out that according to the Paris Accord, richest countries were supposed to share some wealth with poorer countries in terms of help in education and fight against climate change impacts, but with little success so far. The final issue I would like to raise is related to the democratic participation of the citizens in the ruling of our countries and cities. Our cities have become bigger, creating metropolises and a network of medium-sized cities. But in most cases, governance hasn't been adapted to the prevailing reality in governance. Our state and municipal governments, in many cases, still stand by 19th century premises. The regional or metropolitan governance was supposed to tackle down issues of urban development in an integrated perspective. But in most cases, this new type of governance has been added in the midst of prevailing governance infrastructure with little power and mostly dependent on central or federal states, failing in coping with metropolitan or regional issues on urban development. So how to act, for what and for whom? And this is the big question. We have set goals in order to fight against climate change, but we still need to accelerate the implementation of measures, locally, nationwide, and at the international level. We also have to interconnect the fight against climate change with social issues. We still face big challenges in terms of social equity on health, climate change and housing issues, not to mention education issues. The existing pandemic recalls to all of us that we share a one and only planet. What happens in any country can now affect everyone in the world. It did happen with this particular virus. Others will happen, no doubt about it. What else do we need to understand that we cannot go on like we did during the last century? Development, as we understood it, cannot be maintained. Development should be seen as a way of improving the environment and social equity. As a group of international planners, we should stand for extreme actions from our national or regional governments, as well as the municipal councils, for specific and rapid actions on climate change. The IPCC just released its latest report yesterday, stressing that the climate temperature will rise by 2 degrees by 2050, instead of that by 2100, as expected before. A social and political force emerged in the Western countries after the Second World War in order to invest huge efforts into the redevelopment of those countries devastated by the war, including social measures that improve the health of the population. I think that we are at a turning point worldwide, and we have to ask for strong actions from our government and communities in order to stimulate this kind of international efforts around the world to fight against climate change and increase social and health equity. I think that they are the only big issues that matter for the coming decades. Thank you. Michel, this is for you.
Thank you, Sylvain. You just hit on the head exactly what we expected to address in the line of the principles set established by Fernando. Integrated approach, governance issues, responsible development, social equity, and reconsideration of the planning tools. So that is great. I think that's a very good framing. So I wish you an excellent Quebec Day today, because this is your national day today. And we see you, and thank you first, and see you next week for another session on the French session of this Congress. Now it's time for the keynote speakers: Paula Marques, Frank Schnidman, and Lisandro Zeno. Paula, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Michel. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a real pleasure to participate in INTA 44th Congress. Dear President Fernando Nunes da Silva, dear Michel Sodarski, and cher Maurice Charrier. I don't know if Maurice is with us today, or if, but I'm quite sure you will see our sessions today. So I just wanted to salute everyone and saying that, it is really a pleasure to me to be in this Congress. I just want to say that we were talking when we were preparing this intervention. Today is on Thursdays. It's the day of municipal boards meetings, and so I'm in both platforms. I'm so sorry for this inconvenience, but I really didn't want to miss this opportunity to share with you our concerns, our and also the intervention that we have been doing specifically during the COVID crisis that we are still living in. So, to the answer to the question, there is no alternative. Well, we really do think we don't think so, but we know that it's a really hard challenge, and it's not easy to change deeply the economic models of the societies that we are living in. But I think that we can make a path through a new way of building our cities. So yes, it's true, we are living through a deep and acute crisis, and for which I think we were not in some way not well prepared. So we were I would say unprepared to face the crisis that so sudden crisis, that sanitary crisis that we are dealing with. But the moment that we are living today can and should be a founding moment for another approach on building the cities, and it should make us reflect on what we did, what kind of economic model we have been implementing in our cities, how we got here, and above all, what we will do for the next future. So this crisis affects on cities and countries in a traversal way. We know that, but it's in the families with job precariousness, most vulnerable, where there is employment or wage cuts, that the crisis is felt on a very hard and greater severity. I would like to share with you a presentation to have a glimpse on what kind of interventions we have made these times in Lisbon, and so I just want to have your permission to share my presentation, because I think the previous made the intervention is still okay now. So
your screen, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know. First thing, are you seeing? Can you see the presentation? Yes.
Can you put it in full screen?
Yes. Just a moment. Is it okay now?
Okay.
Okay. So for those who have already have knowledge about Lisbon participatory processes, specific in the BIP-ZIP program. The BIP-ZIP program is it's a intervention on priority neighborhoods and zones in the city. And the core of this program is to co-produce, to co-governments, to co-produce a co-government process in the cities, in some different neighborhoods in the city. And it's about this, to redesign the city on a participatory process, on a grassroots planning process. So we are in our 10th anniversary, and so it's, for us, it's very nice to share with you this program. But most of all, what is important, and that's why I started our presentation in this framework, if you want, is how can we pick these programs and the experience that we have been building for the last 10 years in Lisbon in a very, I would say, small scale, but spread all over the city processes on redesign the neighborhoods. How could we pick these skills and transform them in a more structural way of building the city post COVID-19? So I don't know. In the beginning of the pandemic situation, Lisbon had to face immediately how to respond on emergency level. We did approve several measures. Some of them I'm sharing with you. So we had support over 10,000 companies and entrepreneurs that were seeing their activities closed by the lockdown. And so we protect over 8,000 workstations. It's something that for us is really, really important for the social cohesion in the city. So protect workstations and protect the economical ground in the city. And this was the response on 20 million euros from the municipality budget that was approved and was a measure that could, as I said, protect more than 80,000 workstations. On the same level, we were concerned about the housing crisis. So what we decided was on the public housings, in the classical social housing rents, we made the immediately readjustment on the situation of the income of the families that are our tenants. Without, it was a non-bureaucratic, so we just try to readjust daily this situation on the income of our tenants, because in fact the situation, the family situations could change. I wouldn't say daily, but weekly. We had the reports on the income situation of each family, and so without bureaucracy, we just readapt the social housing rent. On the affordable housing, that is a tabled kind of value rent. We made the same intervention. So weekly we understood how the family evaluate the situation on the income, and all the situations that the rent would be more than 30% of the family net income. Immediately we reduced the rent to stay under the 30% of the family net income. So it's two completely different approach on. So it's the same approach on the emergency intervention on two different axes, if you want. And these axes are the most important for us, is the economical tissue on the city, and also the people that are already our tenants. But also we will prove transitorial affordable housing subsidy on the families that are living in a private market that had the same situation as our tenants. So they had cuts in their wages, and so we decided to approve with €500,000 this subsidy, immediately subsidy for the situations on tenants that were in the private market that were having a huge percentage of their rent regarding to their net income. On the most emergency social, regarding the most essential emergency social intervention, we increased an instrument that we had already for funding the families, for supporting basic expenses such as house payments, as I said, payment of water, electricity, gas, and food and medicine expenses for those families that suddenly with this crisis saw their life completely upside down. We strengthened the partnership for the production of solidarity meals, guaranteeing 8,000 meals per day. It is something that it was really hard for us. It was suddenly understand that even people that families that had a life so families with low income, but working class had suddenly so messed up with the situation of lockdown that they had a lack of some basic things like food. So we strengthened these partnerships with the local civil parishes or urban districts, the local associations. And so we decided to do it on not a top-down intervention, but on a co-governance experience that we had in the past. But it was fundamental for us, this experience for these 10 years of this beep-zip energy that could quickly, I would say from one day to the other, in 24 hours to produce these partnerships to face the situation of emergency. In this sector, it was an investment of 2.5 million, and emergency support to social and associative sector like cultural, trade and business sports associations. We had an investment of 7 million. In the same process, no bureaucracy, the less bureaucracy possible, and to support the survival of these associations. So just to say, what is the beep-zip? Today we are in our 10 years of acting. This is the data, the figures about the distribution of these in priority intervention neighborhoods and zones in the city. We have already invested 15 million during these 10 years on this process of co-produce design on interventions in those neighborhoods that are managed by the people, by the councillors, and by the partnerships that each association and each group of neighborhoods do manage autonomously from the municipality. In the BIP-ZIP family, if you want, we had 3 main interventions. As I said, it was really important for us, this thinnest work with the collaboration with local organizations. We had different psychological support to all the citizens that are living in these 67 BIP-ZIP territories. Information about citizen rights, how to appeal for the support, the income support during the lockdown, how to react to some abuses that were carried on from the enterprises or from the private landlords. We developed in 48 hours urban forum platform to support the networks of all the organizations that were working with us in the field. We decided to do a solidarity market initiative that was combining the producers, the small producers from fresh vegetables and fresh food in the metropolitan area of Lisbon that were suddenly, from one day to another, they just had, with the lockdown of the markets, they just had no way to sell their goods. And so the municipality bought the goods, and as you see, the figures were 400 tons of food, and we reached more than 2,050 families reached. Weekly, we distribute with the local associations and the Lisbon civil parishes. Daily, we distribute these foods to the people more in need, and it wouldn't be possible to do it if it wasn't these partnerships with the local associations. So the municipality bought the food, the fresh food. The producers were a partner also. They made us. They distribute in the distribution center with the local associations that organize in their neighborhoods with the civil parishes, with I don't know, like more than 250 teams of citizens that were mobilized to do it with the coordination of the municipality. And this could only be possible because we had this network working in the territories. We also had mobilization for the production of hospital protective material for Lisbon and surrounding area hospitals in partnership with the Lisbon Faculty of Architecture, and civil society initiative that was called Portugal. It's not possible to translate, as you can see, because it works with the COVID acronyms, and it was an initiative all over the country. And what happened was that this initiative was already working in the BIP-ZIP program, and they immediately asked for our solidarity seamstress, different organizations that had these skills to produce this hospital protective material that were certificated by the National Authority of Health. And we produced in 2-3 weeks more than 30,500 units. About public housing policies and thinking about the future, affordable housing in Lisbon. So, in fact, the housing crisis, it's something that we were living in already, and it really started to be more acute in the pandemic situation that we are living. So this is what we are doing nowadays, ongoing on public housing, on affordable housing. So we have different pipelines on different, I would say, it's on the public, in the public umbrella, we have different approaches to produce affordable housing in Lisbon. The municipality had an agreement with the central government. We buy some buildings that were not in use from the national supporting system, social system, from the service that were working on these buildings. They become empty, and we bought from the national government these buildings, and we made the reclassification of these 7 buildings, and nowadays we have 253 units ongoing. They are almost finished, and also student residence near Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon that will have 280 vacancies for students. And these are the figures of the investment that we are doing nowadays in this. I would say these front of producing affordable housing, 100% public investment. We are also building new unities in the cities. We have 2,041 new unities planned in 2 major operations. One of the operations is already ongoing. Almost the unities are almost finished. And also we have this intervention plan on dispersed municipal buildings. It's a less scale, in a very less lower scale, but nevertheless is the rehabilitation of 500 unities that will deplete the stock of empty buildings in the city. And even in this intervention, we will we plan to construct, to build 87 unities in smaller scales, but dispersed in the city. And in a public-private partnership, that is another approach from the municipality on providing public affordable housing, but it's in a intervention with the private market. We have 9 operations for conception of public work models, where the public supports, the municipality supports the operation by put on the private market with the public tender buildings or lands to or rehab or build affordable house unities, and 30% of these unities are to operate in free market, and the other 7% are for affordable house managed directly by the enterprise that makes the operation. But the unities are they enter in our program of affordable house, public affordable house. So all the unities are public property, and they will never they can never be used on the free market. So this 7% of the operation will never be used in the free market. Another experience that we are dealing nowadays is to lease in the private market for sublease unities that are already on, they are already in a situation that could quickly be on disposal of the families that are in our expecting list for affordable housing. I would just wanted to share with you the distribution of what I was presenting in the city. So in public, the blue dots that you can see, either the dark dots, so the dark dots, the green dots, the light dots, and the pink dots and the yellow dots are the production of 100% public initiative, either if it's building, rehab, or the rehab of these buildings that we bought from the local government. And we were working on in the future to have more of these buildings. And the dark pink dots or the brick dots are the initiative of private with the private sector. And I just wanted to share with you some images of what kind of design we are doing it in Lisbon in our public houses. And yes, it's important to redefine the design of our public housings regarding the future that we are dealing with and that we are facing with. The work in conference work from our houses. The houses are not only the place where we go at the end of working day to our families. It's the place where daily we work. I think most of us are today in this conference, in this Congress, working on our houses. So yes, the design has to have that in concern for the future. And the first ones, this image is from the rehab of the public houses, public buildings that we bought from the national government, and the others, yes, it's social housing. It's the new generation of social housing built in the city of Lisbon. And even if it was not our main issue today, it was affordable housing. But I think it's important that I share with you that no matter what kind of families that are going to live in our houses, in our public houses, for us, it's not. It doesn't matter. So we do have to build with quality regarding climate change, regarding fighting poverty, energy poverty, using green spaces, having accessible public space in each one of the operations, and also schools, kindergartens, and sports equipment to the people that are going to live in our houses, no matter what kind of segment we're talking about. And so,
Paula, could you conclude?
Yes. So, as I said in the beginning, it was this finest work, this thin work that we had with this network through several initiatives carry on in close collaboration with local organizations, which allow us to highlight situation of vulnerability and deprivation, such as situation of domestic violence, for example, that until now had not been identified. So, and therefore, this fine work, the citizen participation of local organizations has been fundamental for us to be able to look for answers to this crisis, but it will also be fundamental in the near future on the shift that we have to do about the post-COVID cities that we want to build. And this is the power to co-produce. Otherwise, we will survive. Of course, we will survive to this crisis, but we will not have the deep changing that we need to reborn as the more equal, democratic, and fair cities we are fighting for. And yes, for that we have to reframe the economical model that we want to implement in our cities. And regarding to housing, to right to housing and the right to the city, a strong public and robust housing stock is also a way to regulate the markets. And definitely we have to look to housing as a human right and not as an asset. Imagine that and I'm talking about Portugal. I know that there are other experience in Europe and outside Europe, and is inspiring for us. What I would like to have is this idea of future cities, of our Horizon Challenge, if you want, 1/3 of public, 100% public housing, 1/3 of private market, of course, and 1/3 of non-profit sector. If we had this as an idea of future city, we had, it would be a victory for those who see the need to change and the resistance to change to another economical model in our cities. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Paula. Excellent. If you can stop sharing your screen. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for this analysis and presentation of a deep social involvement of the inhabitants into designing their city of the future. It may not be their own future, but it could be the future of the Portuguese people and the Lisbon people, because then the city will take a bit, maybe 20 years to come to reality. But nonetheless, it is a fascinating program, and you have been properly awarded the prize for that particular program, and that is great. Now, can I invite, still on the housing issues and in the city of the future, Frank Schnidman? He is an attorney he's living in the States. He has been professor at Atlantic University in Florida, and he is a well-known expert in this legal housing policy. Frank, would you like to share your screen and start your presentation? Something missing? Frank? Where is Frank? Frank.
Frank, your microphone is off, Frank.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. First, when I think about my first INTA Congress, which was London Docklands in 1986, I think that was INTA 9. Not all members had fax machines, and no one had a cell phone. And so we have come a long way, because INTA is now Zooming. Quite a difference. My second comment is that I have no slides. So I ask you to just sit back, relax, and listen. I have prepared remarks, and I will be sharing them with INTA, and they can be distributed along with other materials in relation to this Congress. And of course, this Congress is being recorded. My third comment is that COVID is just the latest crisis that forces us to look at the affordable housing issue and the well-being of our citizens, the latest crisis. And as Michelle asked, my presentation addresses the health issues of the city as they relate to the provision of affordable housing. And the focus of my presentation is on the well-being of the city and its citizens, not the physical aspects of the city and affordable housing. Obviously, my presentation has a United States perspective, and it relates to many other countries because in reality, we have all followed similar paths in national, regional, provincial, and local approaches. And my And my presentation, as I stated, mentions that COVID-19 is not the first crisis that has occurred that has resulted in a cause for action to address the affordable housing challenge, as well as the well-being of our citizens. As you listen to my presentation, ask yourself, what are the metrics of well-being? And how do we measure well-being of both the physical infrastructure and the supportive infrastructure of human need, the human infrastructure? INTA advertised this presentation as one that would discuss affordable housing in the context that, quote unquote, health is now one of the main levers of responsible urban development. What approaches and tools should be used to implement it? INTA also asks, quote, how health and well-being should influence the production of affordable housing. In effect, what we are talking about is how considerations for the quality of life should influence not only the physical structure of affordable housing, but the array of services and opportunities available to the residents of these housing units. Therefore, please note that this presentation is not simply about adding jogging paths to affordable housing developments. It is about trying to identify what we have learned and what changes are needed in the approach that we have taken, the mistakes made and the lessons learned, the experience gained. As you will hear, COVID has raised these issues and concerns. It has not been the first time, and it will not be the last. And so we must ask ourselves, what exactly are the problems we seek to solve? What exactly are the problems we seek to solve? And what are the practical solutions? Now, as Michelle introduced, I'm a retired professor of law, a retired professor of urban planning. I've taught at the University of Virginia, George Washington University, the University of Miami, Florida Atlantic University, and spent a few years as a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School. And I've lectured at a number of foreign universities and have had the opportunity to observe affordable housing issues around the globe. As Michelle also said in the introduction, I've been a public official. I had the opportunity to be the executive director of a New York State Legislative Commission on metropolitan and regional areas, which examined, among other issues, housing. I was the executive director of the Fort Lauderdale Downtown Development Authority, which revised its plan to include more than 5,000 new residential units in the downtown, and transitioning that agency from an urban renewal agency to an asset manager of our downtown. And I had the opportunity to organize, establish, and serve as the first executive director of a community redevelopment agency in the city of North Miami. And as Michelle also mentioned, I've had a long and active involvement with INTA. As I recall, even prior to Michelle coming on board, have attended at least a dozen of the international congresses. I was vice president, a board member for 16 years, editor of INTA News for a number of years, and have been an assistant to Michelle in whatever way I possibly could. My affordable housing credentials, which I use to support what I'm about to say, include experience going back to Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and War on Poverty programs. I served as a staff person in neighborhood legal services dealing with landlord-tenant relations, and in the Model Cities program dealing with quality of life issues for subsidized housing. I've been involved in numerous efforts at the federal, state, and local level dealing with affordable housing. And in 1983, the Urban Land Institute published a book I did called Housing, Supply, and Affordability. And I'll talk about that a little later. In January of this year, for the American Bar Association, I organized a virtual conference of 4 afternoons on affordable housing, which looked at the affordable housing issue and COVID-19. It looked at implementing affordable housing efforts. It looked at how we get more affordable housing. And it also looked at who is going to build affordable housing. And I will be providing to INTA the webpage, which will allow anyone to access free of charge the materials from that event. In addition, I'm currently involved with an advocacy group, which is promoting a greater role for the federal government in the provision of affordable housing in cooperation with the Biden administration. And there is a forthcoming article in the summer issue of the American Bar Association Journal of Affordable Housing that I will also provide a digital version to INTA. Now, one thing you can write down before we get into details is a conversion figure that is important. I talk about billions of US dollars, and $1 billion US equals 839,215 euros. So when I say 10 billion or 20 billion, each billion equals 839,215 euros. Michelle told me to make sure that I had that conversion figure. Now, as I said in my opening, I'm going to overview selected United States experience in addressing affordable housing and resident well-being. COVID is not the first time we have faced this, and it is not the first time that other countries at the national level, as we heard in our opening remarks, has been concerned with the quality of life of its citizens in addition to the quality of their housing. In fact, in the Housing Act of 1937, it states, and I quote, "The United States Housing Authority may make loans to public housing agencies to assist the development, acquisition, or administration of low-rent housing for slum clearance projects by such local agencies." And it goes on to state, quote, "As an alternative method of assistance, capital grants may be made to such agencies for such purposes. The capital grants thus made for any low-rent housing or slum clearance project shall be paid in connection with its development or acquisition and shall be strictly limited to the amounts necessary in the determination of the authority to assure its low rent character." To assure its low rent character. In response to a critical shortage of low-income housing as well as slum conditions in many cities, this was the United States government's response to look to local agencies to build housing projects throughout the country. Officials replicated, interestingly enough, existing racial segregation patterns. And when these local governments accepted federal funding, it was not unusual to find separate and similar projects for whites only or for non-whites. We had other housing legislation, but a premier one in the United States was the Housing Act of 1949. A housing act recognizing the extreme shortage that was created by the returning veterans from World War II. It stated in the preamble, quote, "The Congress hereby declares," this is 72 years ago, "the Congress hereby declares that the general welfare and security of the nation and the health and living standards of its people require housing production and related community development sufficient to remedy the serious housing shortage, the elimination of substandard and other inadequate housing through the blighted areas, and the realization as soon as feasible of the goal of a decent home and a suitable living environment for every American family, thus contributing to the development and redevelopment of communities and the advancement of growth, wealth, and security of the nation." The redevelopment focus of the 1949 Act was directed at restoring primarily residential areas and addressing the severe post-war housing shortage. Let me repeat, a decent home, quote, a decent home and suitable living environment for every American family. The federal government also repeated this goal when President Harry Truman, before Congress on July 15th of 1949, signed this bill into law. After 72 years, this goal is still a goal, and one that President Lyndon Johnson tried to reach in the 1960s, and now President Biden is reaching for with the impacts of COVID fostering the current effort. We also had major housing and urban development legislation in 1965. And I quote from the preamble to the legislation: the Housing and Home Finance Administration is authorized and contracted to make annual payments to a housing owner on behalf of a qualified tenant, and in no case shall a contract provide for such payments with respect to any housing for a period of 40 years. The amount of the annual payment, and this is the annual payment to a private party, shall not exceed 40 years. And the subsidy that is provided under this legislation limits the participation of the tenant to 1/4 of the tenant's income, with 3/4 being subsidized by the government. And it states in this legislation, for the purpose of providing a supplementary form of low rent housing, which will aid in assuring a decent place to live for every citizen. In 1965, in the Lyndon Johnson administration, for the purpose of providing a supplementary form of low rent housing, which will aid in the assuring a decent place to live for every citizen. The 1965 legislation introduced into our frame of thinking a rent supplement program that limited tenant rents to 25% of income, and a leased housing program that provided for tenants living in privately owned housing units. As I've said, there are many other federal acts in the United States that deal with the provision of affordable housing, but they deal really with finance, with tax credits, with grants, with loans, and they really do not talk about the suitable living environment, the 1949 goal of a suitable living environment for that decent home. And so when we move on to the presidency of Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, we also see activity that had happened. And if you look at your own national agenda at that time, it is similar. President Lyndon Johnson, in addressing Congress on March 16th of 1964, stated, quote, because it is a right, because it is wise, and because for the first time in our history, it is possible to conquer poverty, I submit for the consideration of the Congress and the country, the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. This was Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program that evolved from the New Frontier efforts of the Kennedy administration. It was not an expansion or improvement of existing old programs, but as President Johnson stated, quote, it can be a milestone in our 180-year search for a better life for our people. It can be a milestone in our 180-year search for a better life for our people. Included in this act were 5 basic opportunities: job training, a community action program for local communities that funded the preparation of long-range plans for the attack on poverty in each local community. It provided for a national volunteer program, a domestic version of the Peace Corps. It provided a loan guarantee program for incentives for the private sector to train and employ people. And it set up an economic opportunity office in the office of the presidency. President Johnson was not unaware of the challenges he faced. And he stated, "We are fully aware of this program and that will not eliminate all poverty in America in a few months or a few years. Poverty is deeply rooted and its causes are many. But this program will show the way to new opportunities for millions of our citizens. It will provide a lever with which we can begin to open the door of our prosperity for those who have been kept outside." The president also said that it will give us the opportunity to test our weapons, to try our energy and ideas and imagination for the many battles yet to come. As conditions change and as experience illuminates our difficulties, we'll be prepared to modify our strategy. And this program is much more than a beginning. In 1965, the president said that it is it is a commitment, it is a total commitment by this president and this Congress and this nation to pursue victory over the most ancient of mankind's enemies. And as I am aware of my time, I'm coming to one of the major points of the current Biden administration American Jobs Plan. The proposal, including affordable housing and physical, and for the first time, directly human infrastructure that supports the well-being of the citizens who live in subsidized affordable housing. Earlier this year, United States Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said that America's post-pandemic phase needs the government to spend money improving daycare, education, and other elements of what she called the quote unquote care, C-A-R-E, care economy. She stated, "Without those pieces, you are not going to be able to recover the economy. So I think it's a mistake to proceed in a small way when the moment is demanding a robust response to the economic collapse due to COVID." The largest part of the Biden administration plan focuses on American homes, school buildings, underground water infrastructure, and the broadband internet expansion. The plan would spend $213 billion to build, preserve, and retrofit more than 2 million affordable homes and commercial buildings. It includes the construction or rehabilitation of 500,000 homes for low and moderate income. An additional $111 billion would go toward cleaning drinking water, including replacement of lead pipes and service lines. It sets aside $100 billion for constructing or modernizing public schools, and $100 billion to build high-speed broadband networks throughout the United States to drive down the cost of the internet. It also calls for $40 billion to improve public housing and $12 billion for community college infrastructure. And the innovative provisions of the plan, for which the care economy, as Senator Gillibrand called it, $400 billion to improve access to quality, affordable home or community-based care for the elderly or people with disabilities. $400 billion to improve quality of care, access to a quality of care for people, the elderly and people with disabilities. And it also expands our Medicaid, our public health care program, to service more individuals. And it also boosts the pay for care workers. So in conclusion, if time allowed, we could examine what state and local governments have undertaken, as well as varied efforts of the private and nonprofit and religious institutions. There are substantial success stories of not only the provision of quality, affordable housing for low and moderate income families, but also social support services necessary to provide that desired community well-being. Please take the time to seek out such success stories in your own community. Now, let me return for a moment to that Urban Land Institute book that I mentioned. It's Housing Supply and Affordability, and it was published in 1983. A reading of this book, 38 years after publication, shows that the critical issues remain unsolved. And as the concluding sentence of the foreword states, and I will read, thus, the solution to assuring an adequate supply of affordable housing, not just for low income or for middle income as well, will not come forth with ease. To understand the problem and the causes of that problem is the best beginning for deciding what actions will best bring a favorable change. As I said in the preface to this book, one of the central themes of these readings, the promising approaches to affordable housing, is that affordability is everyone's problem. The consumers, the governments, and the home building industry all must participate in the solution if housing is to be made affordable. Another major theme of this book is that affordable housing is really a subset of the larger issues of resource allocation in our society. The cost of housing is closely linked to our use of land, the allocation of capital, and the disposition of the total community building stock. The use of these resources will determine the affordability not only of housing, but also of our communities in general. In ending my presentation, let me add that it is now recognized that the vast array of tools available in the expanded definition of infrastructure includes the social support of people. These social infrastructure tools must be accessed in order to fulfill the goal of a decent home and a suitable living environment for all families. And in terms of this INTA44 Congress, necessary for the well-being of the citizens themselves who occupy the physical structures we call affordable housing. Thank you for the honor of being able to present these remarks today.
Thank you very much, Frank. You had opened a lot of doors, a lot of questions that we will come back to you in the discussion. I just return a concept that we try to push the social infrastructure, in a sense that social development becoming a tool for urban development is not something which is next to it or detached from the mainstream of the building of the city. And a very good example of the co-production of housing, of affordable housing in the United States. But we will come back to you because you raise also other points about planning. Lisandro, Zeno, would you like to come in and share with us your experiences as a city councillor of Rosario in Argentina? And we know that you have excellent ideas about the future of your city, and then you can share with us your views about the social infrastructure, that Frank has been mentioned a few minutes ago. Please, Lisandro, if you want to present something, you can split your screen, and that will do.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Yep.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Wait a second. Can you see there?
Yes. Could you make it in full screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks to Paula and Frank. It was very interesting to hear you. And I want to thank also Luis Bueso that connect me with INTA and with you, Michael, so that I can be present today in this Congress. I'm gonna start presenting me. My name is Lisandro Zeno. I'm a councillor of the city of Rosario. I am 31 years old. I assumed my mandate 4 years ago. Rosario is a city of 1 million inhabitants. It's like the second city in Argentina. Also, I am a cancer survivor. I had leukemia in 2014, and it will be 5 years since my second bone marrow transplant. I also met the Argentinian Pope, Franciscus. Okay, starting with the presentation, I want to say that our country seems to be in a moment of political crisis. There are two opposing parties that divide the country in two, and while the only beneficiaries are the politicians on each side, the population lives increasingly in poverty. Our planet is experiencing an unprecedented climate crisis, and it is critical that we, the younger generations, drive the paradigm shift. Cities generate around the 70% of greenhouse gases, so we, from local governments, have a lot to contribute to the climate fight. Cities around the world throughout the 20th century were removing people from the center of the scene and giving more prominence to vehicles. Nowadays, almost 80% of the public space, which is everything that is between each building line, is destined for vehicles, not only to circulate, but also to park. This brought many problems. For instance, cities are crowded with vehicles, suffering significant traffic congestion, which generates poor air quality and also higher greenhouse gas emissions. As a result of this mobility focused on the use of the private car. It also brought with it large noise levels, which cause noise pollution. We can say that road accident rate is the other pandemic. In our country, around 70,000 people die per year. It is a number that is far from to go down. For this reason, all our initiatives are, and a large part of our projects in the Council have two objectives. First, to build cities for the people, where the person is at the center of the scene, with the aim of restoring the quality of life of people, and work from our space against climate change. The city has a lot to contribute against climate change, and we believe that from our initiatives, it also makes this fight. Rosario has an inventory of greenhouse effect gases where 50% of the gases are the product of stationary energy. This is the energy that is consumed in homes, in commerce, and in industries. Secondly, transport contributes almost 25%, and lastly, urban solid waste, which also contributes 25% of these gases. The following are some projects presented in the last 4 years that represent the idea of the city that we seek. A city where health, common good, and equality between people are prioritized. A city that invites Argentines and people from all around the world to plan their future in it, due to the quality of the life we offer. First of all, La Heladera Solidaria is a project that arises taking into account several factors. First, it is believed that 1/3 of the planet's food production is wasted, thrown away, And since in our country there are almost 50% of poor people, there are a lot of people who unfortunately do not have enough to eat. For this reason, the Solidarity Refrigerator project seeks to link bars and restaurants that have excess cooked food with social organizations that in the territories, in the neighborhoods, are responsible for providing food aid to the people. So that plate of food that is left over in a restaurant, instead of being thrown away, ends up on the table of a vulnerable family in our city. In order to encourage active mobility, and also because of the pandemic and the bus driver strike, we were without buses for more than 2 months in this year and a half. We promoted the temporary bike lines. We managed to increase the number of kilometers of bike lines in our city by almost 100%. And that brought an instant benefit in terms of the number of cyclists on the streets where the temporary bike lines were installed. Just by painting lines, the number of cyclists who use those streets increased between 400 and 500%. Imagine what would happen if we install secure infrastructure. Also last year, due to the pandemic, the number of people allowed in bars, restaurants, and gastronomic places in our city was reduced. That is why we proposed that the space where vehicles are parked be used by bars and restaurants to put tables and chairs. This brought 2 great results. The possibility of contagion from customers is reduced since the space is outdoors, and it was a measure to try to collaborate with the economic crisis and secure and maintain shops. Other of our initiatives has to do with changing the regulation of the building code and forcing new buildings to have parking spaces for bicycles on the ground floor, understanding that it is a way of collaborating and encouraging their use. We also want to build large, free and massive parking lots for bicycles, and we propose it at the first place, the bus terminal, which is located in the center of the city and which we understand is a neuralgic place surrounded by clubs, universities, and commercial and gastronomic promenades. We understand that it is a strategic place where people can leave their bicycle and feel safe that this will not be stolen. Rosario has a public bicycle system, a system that has been in operation for 7 years, and there are almost 100,000 registered users. It started on the center of the city and it was expanding concentrically. Today, it has more than 60 stations, and the idea is that by 2022, we will reach 100 stations, trying to link the entire city, reaching all the neighborhoods of our city with a public mobility service. As a result of the loss of quality of life that occurred throughout the 20th century in big cities, those who can go to live in smaller cities that still retain better conditions. These are usually nearby cities and towns, which preserve quality green spaces, cities that often do not have the corresponding services. Electricity is constantly cut off, there is poor internet quality, when it rains they flood, there are no sewers, and in that sense, they prioritize living in a greener environment with more silence and with more security, despite the fact they have to spend a lot of time per day driving to Rosario where they work or where they study. So we can say that Rosario is part of a metropolitan area in conjunction with more than 10 cities and communes. Together, we are almost 1.5 million people, and we are closely related. For this reason, we are also working on a metropolitan mobility plan where intermodality and active mobility are prioritized. We propose to generate safe infrastructure with metropolitan bicycle lines which connect Rosario with each of the cities that are on an average 5 to 15 kilometers away, where Rosario builds its bicycle line to the border and the neighboring city builds the bicycle line to its border as well. We also think about intermodality. In the near future, with the reactivation of passenger trains, people can begin their journey by bicycle, get their bicycle on the train, and continue it until the end. And also, why not, by bus? We must design buses that allow bicycles to be transported. Next. In Rosario, we have the Calle Recreativa. It's like a ciclovia. It operates on Sunday mornings in many streets of our city. There are about 28 kilometers, where every Sunday mornings from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., motorized traffic is not allowed, and that space is given to people to walk, to skate, to ride the bicycle, and for the family to go out for a walk in a much more pleasant environment. We have insisted that it must last longer. Let it not only be in the morning, but also in the afternoon. We also want holidays to be added. It is used by almost 70,000 people from Rosario every Sunday. But it only works in the center of our city, and we intend to take it to all districts. One of our proposals was that there be one Calle Recreativa at least in each of the 6 districts of our city. Rosario has a very important public transport system. It must be taken into account that almost 30% of our population travels daily by bus. In this sense, we have also been promoting the implementation of more exclusive bus lines to reduce travel times for that majority of the population that takes bus. We propose it to increase the number of exclusive lines and do it through pilot tests so that people can travel in less time, and emphasize that the city needs its population to move by public transport. In 2019, we promoted, after many months of work, especially changing old traditions, the pedestrianization of the most important open-air shopping center in the city, Calle San Luis. This was the Saturday morning before Mother's Day. We have transformed that space into a pleasant space for people to go for a walk and do their shopping. And we managed to help shoppers in a time of economic crisis. The truth is that it was a success, having convinced many of the shoppers who thought that the way to generate higher sales was by generating more parking spaces and facilities for people to come and buy goods. Thousands of people turned to the initiative, and obviously the benefits for shoppers in terms of sales were very great. The idea is to continue adding intermittent pedestrianizations on Saturday mornings in the more than 30 open-air shopping centers that exist in our city in almost all districts. We understand that electric mobility is not the future, it's the present. In this sense, we approve an ordinance that allows the use of electric scooters in our city, incorporating them as a new actor in urban mobility, and obviously posing certain requirements and obligations, as well as certain rights, because we understand that the fact that people choose the scooter over a large motor vehicle brings benefits to all the community. We also have been working on the maximum speed limits allowed. This year, in the month of May, was the 6th United Nations World Week for Road Safety, and the premise was 30 streets. This means reducing the maximum speeds to 30 kilometers per hour on the residential streets and 50 kilometers per hour on the avenues, precisely to pacify the streets and reduce the number of injuries and fatalities resulting from road accidents in our city, and also to try to return part of the public space to people so that promotes active mobility as walking and as cycling. At the beginning of this year, we were promoters of the Zero Alcohol Ordinance, another initiative that has to do with reducing the factors that cause road risks. Alcohol is present in a quarter of the road accidents and exists in our city. And we understand that the message has to be clear from the state. When driving, blood alcohol is not accepted, no matter how little it is. Our city is located next to the Great Paraná River, and on the other side are the wetlands, which is a territory of islands that belongs to the province of Entre Rios. And over the last few years, we have been suffering fires on these islands that, beyond affecting wetlands and all the importance that they have on biodiversity, water retention, and others, notably affects the quality of the air that we breathe in our city, taking it to levels that are very harmful to our health. In this sense, we propose it, and the project was approved, that air quality sensors be installed in different points of the city, that this information be publicly accessible so that anyone through a mobile app can see the quality of the air that is breathed, so that it can be raised awareness and promote different public policies that will improve the quality of the air we breathe, not only because of the burning of the islands, but only because of the pollution generated, especially by motor vehicles. Although our province has a law for the promotion of renewable energies, where in each one of the bills of the provincial energy company, a minimum percentage is charged to encourage the transition to clean energies, we do not see that this is giving results. We understand that low-rate loans could help more people by buying solar panels and increase the percentage of green energy in our city. With regard to the generation of waste, we have several initiatives. We are developing a plan to eliminate single-use disposable plastics. We have two projects. First, one that aims to ban plastic bags in all shops in our city. This project is under discussion, still in committees in the council. We also carry out the project so that people can take their own container to the bars and restaurants and load their food in them. This reduces the number of single-use plastic containers. Taking into account that almost 60% of the household waste generated in our city is organic, we are carrying out a strong composting campaign, encouraging home composting from training courses provided by the municipality and installing community compost bins in public spaces, such as parks or squares in our city. Not only so that this large percentage of urban waste is treated and stopped being collected to take away to a sanitary landfill, but also to serve as a space for social interaction, a link between neighborhoods, and also for the appropriation of the public space. The way to achieve greater adherence to this change, which will surely take time, is through economic incentives. So we intend that by showing the composting network, citizens have a discount of the municipal tax that is paid for collection of waste, understanding that if less waste is thrown away, the state will also have savings in the management of this waste. One of the most important projects that we presented is the superblocks, like Barcelona. This is the creation of a new urban cell made up of several blocks where vehicular access is limited or restricted. Neighbors and shoppers will be able to continue entering their garage or shop, but crossing is prevented. The public space inside the superblock is pacified, allowing children to play. Shoppers set up tables and chairs. More green spaces are installed, and some trees are planted. We understand that all this also affects the quality of life. We want every district in the city to have a superblock. This can be done through pilot tests, and those little by little install the theme. Another important point of this proposal is citizen participation. It's the key that neighbors, shoppers, organizations, and universities work together with the government to be able to implement them. We think that it is necessary to use tactical urbanism. In this way, large budgets or expenses are not needed, since with light, cheap, and fast interventions, with paint, with flower pots, with light urban furniture, we can achieve these transformations. In this way, we will take space from the vehicles and return them to the neighbors to recover the concept of the neighborhood and social interaction. Now I'm going to talk about some conclusions. Much of the scientific community tells us that the pandemic is the product of a zoonosis, consequence of the extremely environmental alteration produced by human activity. This pandemic generated a profound public health system to the point of ending the lives of millions of people, in addition to paralyzing our lives unpredictably. We can take advantage of this as a turning point and begin to relate in a different way with the environment under the concept of a single health, animal, human, and environmental. And in that sense, it seems to me that from local governments, from cities, we have much to contribute to the fight against climate change. In Argentina, we have the Argentine Network of Municipalities Against Climate Change. And one of the things they taught us is that change can also come from the bottom up. This is why many of our projects go in this direction, which in addition to helping to mitigate climate change and adapt its consequences to society, collaborate in offering a better quality of life to people who live in cities. We know that by 2050, 80% of the world's population will live in them. It is a very good time to work on agreements, on ideas, on long-term public policies, on consensus. We must question our mental schemes and learn to dialogue with people who think differently without disqualification. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zeno. Thank you very much. My mic is open. Thank you very much. You have introduced quite a number of ideas. I found the three presentations very innovative in there, in describing the measures and the actions, the public actions, public measure, public activity in creating or improving the quality of life of the citizens. There are words that you have used that you introduced into the debate, the reference to the neighborhood as a level of decision, in addition to the conventional level of decision. Thank you for making reference of the super block which is still at work in Barcelona and in your city as well. That's excellent. Now there is a concept you have introduced, is also the single health, One Health, which is the new concept presented by the OMS, the World Health Organization, and fortunately it's something we're working with a lot of French institutions on this One Health attitude. If you are interested in that, we can send you a lot of documents which have been published quite recently on the issue.